welcome back to the channel. For today's video, I'm giving myself a creative challenge. I've decided to make an entire outfit out of only supplies I already have on hand. Over the years, with all the different projects I've done and going to fashion school, I've held on to a lot of things, a lot of big chunks of fabric and a lot of notions. I figured since it's COVID anyways and none of the supply stores are actually open, why not use up all these leftovers and make something new? After pulling out all of the supplies and taking a look, here is what I've come up with. The first idea that I had was to use this 100% cotton to make a pleated skirt. I haven't done pleats in a really long time and I thought that this fabric was perfect for it. Because it's 100% cotton, it'll press really nicely and probably hold the pleats really well. Instead of a typical waistband and zipper closure, I decided to use up this old webbing and buckles from a previous collection, and I'm gonna put a couple of these on the left-hand side of the skirt. This will also allow it to be really adjustable because you're gonna be able to loosen or tighten the straps. Up top, I'm gonna make a turtleneck sweater with some really dramatic sort of puffy bell sleeves, and I'm gonna use a semi-transparent, really loose knit sort of sweater material. This is one of my favorite fabrics that I've ever come across. It's really beautiful and drapes really nicely, and it's just all around really soft, so I think it's gonna be perfect for this application. Lastly, I designed one more piece to break up all of this black, and that is a white sweater vest. It's gonna have a V-neck finished with some bands along the neckline and the armholes, and it's gonna be made out of this white ribbed material. I originally bought this to just be cuffs on a sweater, so I have a good amount of it left. Also, it has some body to it. It's not super thin and flimsy, so I think it's gonna have the right amount of structure to be a sweater vest. With all that said, once this outfit is done, I'm gonna list the actual pieces that you see me make here today on my official website, lindevil.com. So if you really like what you see here today, keep that in mind. Now, we have a design, we have our supplies picked, let's get into drafting the patterns. The first thing I'm drafting is the pleated skirt. To start, I'm making a box that is as wide as my hip measurement, plus about 5 inches extra for overlap on either side. I'm making the box as tall as I want the finished skirt length to be, 15 inches. From there, I'm going to create some seams and a dart so that the skirt will contour to my waist. Now I'm going to draw some evenly spaced vertical lines where I want to place the pleats. These vertical lines will get slashed open 2.5 inches, spread apart, and then taped down onto a new piece of paper. All pleats are also getting clearly marked with notches and arrows to avoid any confusion later on. This definitely isn't a hard thing to do, but it takes a ton of time, and I basically used an entire roll of Scotch tape. Now that all of the slashing and spreading is done, I'll transfer each individual pattern piece to tracing paper, adding a 1/2 inch seam allowance all around. Next up is the pattern for the sweater vest. Instead of making this pattern from scratch, I'm using an existing pattern for a top that I already sell on my website as a base. I know exactly how this top fits, so I can easily just make some small adjustments to it, such as lowering the armhole, narrowing the shoulder, and creating a V neckline. This will also get transferred to tissue paper pattern pieces, this time with only a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Lastly, I'm creating the sweater pattern, based loosely around a ready-to-wear shirt that I already own. I am using this shirt as a reference because I really like the fit of it, particularly around the armhole and waist. Next, I'll draft the sleeves, using the measurements from the front and back armholes. Now that I have the sort of basic fitted sleeve shape, I'll mark and cut off the bottom portion that will form my elongated cuffs. That piece is essentially done, but the top of the sleeve needs to be slashed and spread to create that fullness that I'm looking for. I'll do this similarly to how we did the pleats, drawing even vertical lines and slashing along them. The only difference is that instead of slashing the whole way through, I will leave a tiny bit of paper attached at the top. This is because I only want fullness at the bottom of the sleeve, and leaving it attached will ensure that the shoulder measurement stays the same. Once I have all my little strips taped down, this piece can be transferred to tracing paper as well. At this point, all my patterns are almost done, but there are a few last little things I need to do before moving on. I'm measuring my sweater neckline to create the turtleneck piece, which is really just a rectangle. And then lastly, I'm creating the pattern pieces for the sweater vest neck and armbands. These are also basically just rectangles, except that the neck piece has some triangular cutouts so it can form that V shape. Now that we have all of our patterns drafted and all of our pattern pieces made, we can move on to cutting. The first thing I'm cutting is the sweater vest, followed by the sweater, and finally the pleated skirt. Once I have all pieces cut for a particular piece, I am bundling them all together and tying them up with a spare scrap of fabric. Alright you guys, with all of that cutting done, we can move on to my favorite part of this whole process, the sewing. When I'm making a whole outfit, I usually like to start with the piece that I think will be the most amount of work first, and then sort of work backwards from there. In this case, it's definitely gonna be our pleated skirt. Despite that fact though, I'm very, very excited about it. I drafted it with a little bit of, I guess, an unusual construction for a pleated skirt, and I also just haven't done pleats in a really long time, and I'm excited to get in there with the iron and just get some really satisfying shots of these nice sharp pleats. So with all of that said, let's get into it. The first step in sewing my pleated skirt is to sew the darts in all of the vertical seams, making sure to press them open. This will create two super wide rectangular pieces, one that will be the outside and one that will be the inside of the skirt. Next, I'm going to take some of my webbing and wrap it through one end of both of my buckles. Those buckles will then get tacked onto the right edge of the skirt on the outside piece. Now that I have both the inside and outside pieces prepped, they will get sewn right sides together around the whole perimeter minus a 10-inch opening at the left side seam. Next, I will pull the whole skirt through that opening and turn it right sides out, pressing all of the edges to keep them nice and sharp. Finally, onto the pleats. I'm holding the pattern piece up to the skirt and chalking out all of my notches so that I know where to fold, and then from there, I'm just going to town. Folding one pleat at a time and pressing them at max temperature for this fabric with lots of steam. As I complete each pleat, I'm pinning them into place with 2 pins so that they stay perfect for when I go to sew them down later on. With all of the pleats pressed and pinned, I can now move on to sewing them down. Each pleat will get sewn 5.5 inches down from the waist, as close to the edge of the pleat as possible. This is not the typical construction of a pleated skirt, as normally they have a separate waistband piece that would get sewn on at this point. However, I decided I wanted to make the entire skirt clean finish and have the pleating go all the way up to the edge. I just think it looks cooler this way. Almost done now. Off camera, I tried the skirt on and marked out where I wanted the webbing that would hold the other half of my buckles to attach. With that marked, I quickly sewed the webbing into place and we are good to go. To assemble my sweater, I'm starting by prepping my cuffs with the serger. Next, I'm sewing the underarm seam on my top sleeve and then gathering up the bottom edge. Now I can baste that onto the cuff, check that the gathers look nice and even the whole way around, and finally finish that edge off with the serger. With the sleeves done, I can start working on the body of the sweater, sewing the shoulder seams and then attaching the turtleneck piece. What you're watching right now is actually my second time doing the neck on this sweater. More on that later. Next up is to sew the side seams, attach the sleeves, and quickly finish off the hem with my cover stitch machine. Next up is the sweater vest. I'm starting by sewing the shoulder seams and then attaching the V neckband. To make sure that V is as sharp as possible, I'm sewing it with my single needle machine first and then just finishing it off with the serger after. With the neck complete, all I need to do is sew the side seams, attach the armbands, and once again, finish the hem with the cover stitch machine. Easy peasy on this one. Alright you guys, we're back and the outfit is done and sitting in front of me. As I had mentioned, I started with the pleated skirt, thinking that this was going to be the garment that would be the most amount of work. However, it went super smoothly. Like, it worked out perfectly the way that I planned it. It's the right length, it fits really nicely, the buckles worked really well. Exactly as expected, the pleats pressed into the fabric super well. They're so sharp and they're holding their shape just incredibly. So no complaints about the pleated skirt, it went super well. The sweater, on the other hand, I had a small problem with, and that was the turtleneck. When I drafted the turtleneck, I took my neck measurement the whole way around and added a couple of inches to it, which is something I would do if I was sewing this out of like a cotton jersey or even a bamboo knit. However, this knit fabric is very, very loose and kind of stretches and spreads out once you cut it. So with that couple of inches on both the turtleneck and the neck opening, it ended up being super wide and almost like a boat neck. So it was wavy the whole way around, it was super big, it looked horrible. So for that one, I went back to the pattern, made some adjustments, and instead of the turtleneck opening being my neck measurement plus a couple of inches, I literally made it just my neck measurement. And that was about, I think, 13 inches. I knew, however, this time that I didn't need to add wiggle room to be able to get it over my head because the fabric itself was gonna stretch out anyways. Once I did that, it turned out perfectly. I also made the turtleneck a little bit higher. I thought, why not make it a little more dramatic? Instead of a mock neck, make it like a true turtleneck that comes all the way up here. So once I fixed that, it went pretty well. I was originally a little nervous about the sleeves, but the sleeves went fine. They sewed together perfectly, the gathers are nice and even. Sewing this material to the bamboo wasn't hard at all. The hem was a little tricky using the cover stitch machine because I don't use that machine a lot, to be honest. And this is a really loose fabric, so the machine kind of wants to pull it into the feed dogs and almost eat it up, if that makes sense. So I kind of had to really like force it along as I was hemming it. However, I think the final product turned out great. The material, as expected, looks so beautiful. It's so soft. It's just the right amount of sheer without being something like a mesh. And I think it's a really nice piece that you could wear sort of in an everyday look, or you can spice it up and wear it with like a more fun look. Lastly, the final piece that I worked on, and the one that I knew was gonna go totally fine, was the sweater vest. It actually took me longer to switch all of my machines from black thread over to white thread than it did to sew up this sweater vest. I think I sewed it in a matter of like 15 minutes. It went exactly as expected. The V-neck turned out great, super sharp where it's supposed to be, and I like the thickness of the bands on both the armhole and the neck opening. The sweater vest is such a simple little white piece, but I think it's something that you can have a lot of fun styling. You can wear it with nothing under, you can wear it with a brightly colored top under. I don't know, I just feel like you can play around with it a lot and really create some unique looks with it. Now, I think that's enough about the sewing process. Let's get this outfit on and see how all the pieces work together. And that's where I'm gonna end today's video. I really hope that you all enjoyed. I had so much fun giving myself this little creative challenge, pulling out all of my old scraps, and almost taking a walk down memory lane, to be honest, remembering all of the projects that I had done and where all of these different fabrics and materials came from. I think all the pieces turned out pretty well. I'm super, super happy with the pleated skirt. I absolutely love it. I think I might even make another one for myself in like a plaid material or a red or a yellow or something like that. Also remember, if you really dug this outfit, all 3 pieces will be for sale on my official site, Lindevil.com. There you can also find pieces that I've made in past videos, as well as my entire underwear collection. If you guys have any ideas for future sewing videos, please let me know in the comments below because I would love to see them. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one.